Welcome, my decaying darlings, to Restless grounds, where the tales are as twisted as the last breath whispered onto a page that refuses to tan. I'm your host, the Groundkeeper, and tonight's bedtime fright is the writer's block cure. Lie back, close your eyes, but don't blame me if the words start scratching at the inside of your skull, because some cures don't heal the block. They simply end the writer. The ink was still wet when the phone rang. Elias Crowe lifted his head slowly, the fountain pen resting heavy in his palm like a thing that had just finished feeding. On the page lay the final paragraph of his short story. A critic, pompous and red-faced, choking at his own book signing as something thick and black filled his throat. The words were flawless. They tasted like revenge. He allowed himself a small, dry smile. 10 years of rejection slips. 10 years of Lena working double shifts while he stared at blank pages and told her, "My time is coming." Pride had kept him alive. Pride, and now this pen. He didn't remember buying it. That morning it had simply been there, nestled in the back of the drawer among dried-out ballpoints and broken pencils he swore he'd thrown away years ago. The nib was sharp, the barrel cool at first, then warming the longer he held it. The ink never ran low. It never even needed refilling. The phone kept ringing. He answered. Elias. His old agent's assistant, voice shaking. Harlan is gone. Collapsed at the signing. They said it looked like he was drowning on dry land. Something black coming out of his mouth. Like ink. Elias stared at the page. The ink glistened under the desk lamp. He thanked her politely and hung up. Coincidence? Of course it was. Writers notice patterns, that's all. The apartment smelled of old paper and something faintly metallic that night. He told himself it was the radiator again. Lena came home late, kissed his cheek, and asked how the writing had gone. He showed her the story. She read it once, twice, then set it down without a word. Her eyes lingered on the pen. "Where did you get that?" she asked quietly. "Always had it," he lied. Pride wouldn't let him admit otherwise. The street lamp outside flickered in threes. Flash, flash, dark, like it was counting something. Elias never noticed. He was already starting chapter 2. The next story came faster. The landlord, Mr. Voss, the man who raised the rent every 6 months with a smile like a paper cut. Elias wrote him slipping on the narrow stays, neck snapping clean, body twitching once before the silence. The pen moved so smoothly the words felt pulled out of him rather than pushed. When he finished, the page was warm to the touch. 2 days later Voss was dead. Fell down the stairs, Lena said over coffee, her spoon clinking too loudly against the cup. The super said the banister just gave way. She looked at Elias across the table. "That story you let me read. The details were exact." "Hunches," Elias said, smiling the way proud men do when they are cornered. "Writers absorb life. It's what we do." But that night the ink smelled wrong. Copper and something sweeter. Like meat left too long in the dark. He told himself it was cheap paper. He told himself a lot of things. The deaths followed the chapters with surgical precision. His college roommate who still owed him $300, written as a quiet heart attack in his sleep. Gone by morning. The barista who always shorted his change, written as a car wreck on the Rainslick Bridge. Happened that same afternoon. Each time the pen grew warmer. The nib scratched louder against the paper, as though it were carving instead of writing. Elias's fingers cramped, yet he couldn't stop. The stories were brilliant. Publishers were calling. For the first time in his life, people were waiting for his next page. Lena stopped reading drafts. She simply watched him write from the doorway, arms folded, face pale. "Your hand," she said once. "It moves like it's not yours anymore." He laughed, dry and brittle. "That's the muse, darling. Finally showed up." Small things began to vanish. His old ballpoints, the half-used notebooks, even the rejection letters he'd kept like scars disappeared from the drawer. Only the fountain pen remained, full, patient, waiting. Success arrived the way death does, quiet, then sudden. A partial manuscript sold for more than he'd made in a decade. The new agent gushed. "Keep going, Elias. This is gold." So he did. He locked the study door, ignored Lena's soft knocks, ignored the way she whispered through the wood. "People are dying, Elias. People you wrote about." Pride answered for him. "Art imitates life. Or maybe life finally decided to imitate me." One night the pen guided him into a scene he hadn't planned. A rival writer he'd once admired, alone in a hotel room, choking on the same black fluid. The description was merciless. When Elias finally set the pen down, he heard a single, soft gasp from somewhere beyond the walls. Too close, too wet. He told himself it was the wind. The manuscript was finished 2 weeks later. He mailed it, collapsed into bed, and for 7 full days nothing happened. No calls, no obituaries. Lena smiled again, tentative, real. She touched his cheek and said, "It's over. You did it." Elias locked the pen in the drawer, turned the key twice, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. "I cured the block," he told the empty room, "on my own." He slept like a man who believed it. The galley proofs arrived on a gray Thursday. Elias sat at the desk, the same lamp humming its old 3-beat rhythm. Lena was out with friends, celebrating the advance. He sliced open the package, flipped straight to the end. He remembered the final chapter clearly. The triumphant writer signing his first copies, the crowd applauding, the pen raised like a trophy. The page was wrong. The words were in his handwriting, every loop, every slant, but he had no memory of them. The pen lay beside the proofs now, though he had locked it away. It was warm again, and so the author, cured at last, sat alone at his desk. The pen, once savior, now collector. It slipped from his fingers only after the nib found the vein at his wrist. The ink flowed out, red this time, endless, filling the final page as his story ended. The block was cured forever. The writer never wrote again. Elias tried to stand. The pen was already in his hand. The nib pressed against his skin, gentle as a lover's first kiss, then sharp. A single prick. The blood came willingly, dark and thick, mixing with the ink already on the page. He heard the wet scrape of the nib carving letters. He could no longer stop. The room filled with the smell of copper and something sweeter. His own wrist opened wider. Each heartbeat pushed more of him onto the paper. In that moment everything reframed, cruel and perfect. The first chapter hadn't been fiction. The pen had been recording the critic's death as it happened, forcing Elias's hand to transcribe it in real time. Every inspiration had been the last wet rattle of a dying throat traveling up the nib. The copper smell wasn't imagination. It was the scent of the very deaths he'd just documented. The vanishing pens and notebooks hadn't been misplaced. They had simply been set aside once their work was done, waiting for the next writer who needed a cure. His pride had been the perfect blindfold. He had needed success so badly he never asked why the words came so easily, why the pen never ran dry, why every victim had been someone who once stood in the way of his genius. The pen finished the page with a final, delicate flourish. Elias's wrist opened wider. The room tilted, but one thread refused to tie itself. In the corner of his darkening vision, on the wall where no light reached, something moved. The cheap ballpoint he had lost weeks ago, the one that had vanished with all the others, was scratching faint, deliberate letters into the plaster. The sound was dry, insistent, like a fingernail on bone. For words took shape. She was next. Lena's name. The pen in his hand gave one last, satisfied twitch, and the page turned. Well, my darlings, turns out some blocks aren't meant to be cured. They are meant to be the headstone. That pen didn't care about talent. It only cared about the final sentence. And the moral, write if you must. Just remember, the best stories are the ones that finish themselves. Now put your own pen down, before it decides to sign your name next.